You can make this in Blender. It doesn't matter who you are or what you know. I mean, look at it. It doesn't look that crazy, right? Even if you're intimidated by the sheer scope and craziness of things that Blender can do, I can assure you that you can have your own little vase by the end of this video, even if you've never touched this program once in your life. Here you'll learn how to build a simple model, how to color it, and how to render it. No crazy or fringe techniques, all just the most common modeling tools, and with minimal shortcut keys. All in Blender, which, as you should know, is completely free and always will be. You definitely won't learn everything, but you will learn enough to be able to build lots of different things. Once you've hopefully gained enough confidence by doing this, a whole new world of possibilities will open up for you in the program. So let's start with. But also, don't forget that 3D art as a whole is easily one of the most complicated art forms. So even if you're getting lost in this tutorial, don't fret. Believe it or not, humans were not put on this earth to manipulate digital cubes. So you're not stupid for not being able to get it right away. Just keep going at it and you'll get there eventually. So first of all, we're not actually going to open Blender yet. I want to give you a quick crash course on how all of 3D art works as a whole, just so you know how things go. All of 3D art, from the most basic of objects to the most realistic of characters, is built using polygons. Literally, just shapes. So making something in 3D isn't that much different than if I dumped a bunch of paper squares in front of you and told you to make a house. You tape together 4 to make the walls, you tape together 2 to make the roof, and now you have a house. It's not the best house, but it is a house. If you wanted to make it better, you'd probably have to go out of your way to cut out a bunch of little things and tape them together. But in 3D art programs, you can follow the same process, but there are so many extra tools to make every little change way easier than in real life. From warping the shape of each square, to being able to magically smooth out the whole thing. All you need to know is what those tools are and how to use them. It'll take a while to learn all the best ways to do everything, but I'll at least show you where to start. And if you need something to come back to, there will be a link in the description to the script that I wrote for this video, as well as a truncated list of the important parts of the tutorial, where you can use Ctrl F to search for keywords and look back on anything that I wrote, so you don't have to scroll through the video to find things. I know this is a long video, so make sure you use the chapter markers in the video play bar as checkpoints, so you can stop and start as you please. Now let's get into the actual program. You always download it from blender.org, and it'll always be free. I mean, you can get it from Steam, but then it would require a login to use. I don't know why you'd want that. Just go to blender.org, go to the download tab at the top, and just download it. For me, 5.0 just came out. But what I'm going to teach you is so fundamental, I'd be surprised if it ever changed, so don't worry about the version. But if you downloaded it a long time ago and haven't touched it since, I'd highly recommend downloading the new version though. When you boot it up, this is what you'll see. Click away from the splash screen, and there's a cube, a light, and a camera. These exist in the viewport window, which is the window into your scene. You're going to do almost everything in this section. You'll also see some extra panels off to the side, but just to make things easier to look at, grab the edge of the panels and move them off to the right, since we won't need those until later. Same with the stuff at the bottom, but we won't need that one at all, so just keep it there. There are also tons of drop-downs and tabs and all sorts of junk that might be intimidating at first. I'll show you where the most important things are. Now the most important thing to learn is how to look around. For this tutorial, I want to almost exclusively use the tools in front of you, even though they all have shortcuts on your keyboard and mouse. But in this case, I'll show you all the main ways of looking around, which are using the visible gizmos, using the shortcuts, and a special third thing which I'll explain later, which I think will be the most natural to the most people. But first, with the gizmos. Up in the right corner of the viewport window, you'll see all these gizmos and buttons, which you use by clicking on them and dragging. The big axis up here orbits whatever you're looking at. The magnifying glass zooms into or out of it. And the hand pans left, right, up, and down. Ignore the last two for now. These buttons mainly exist for laptop users, since they don't have a scroll wheel, which a lot of the shortcuts use. But they might be useful to you as well to get started with. Just using them, you can move yourself anywhere in the scene. It's always a good idea to practice this movement. Now the shortcuts for looking and moving, which correspond to the same gizmos we just used. In the bottom left, I have an add-on to show you what buttons I'm pushing as I'm pushing them, so pay attention to that. By default, you click down on your scroll wheel and drag to orbit. Scroll to zoom in and out. And shift and clicking your scroll wheel at the same time to pan. It'll definitely take some time and practice to make these movements feel natural. but it'll happen eventually. If something really doesn't work for you though, like if you don't have a scroll wheel at all, you can reassign the keys of those actions if you want. In the top left of the Blender window, you can go to Edit, Preferences, and then Key Map to reassign literally every single shortcut in the entire program. You just have to remember what the program calls that action, or what key combination the action uses. These actions are called Rotate View, Pan View, and Zoom View. Just search those up, reassign it to whatever works for you, and save Preferences in the bottom left. Or you can just learn how Blender does it. It's up to you. But there's actually a third method of looking around, and I feel like this one would be the most natural to the most people. Go to View in the top left, then Navigation, then click Walk Navigation, or the shortcut, which is Shift, and the backtick or tilde key, which is the little squiggly button to the left of the 1 on your keyboard. This basically turns Blender into a video game. You use WASD, or the arrow keys, to move, R and F to go up and down, and then just use the mouse to look around. You can even hold Shift to sprint. Once you're in the right spot, just click. Or if you want to go back to where you started, right-click. Even though I've built up the muscle memory to use the shortcuts for looking around, I still use this mode for some special things, so it's a great thing to know about. It's honestly just fun to mess with sometimes. But all of this can be a little inefficient if you just want to focus on a single object, and thankfully there's a button for that. First, select the object you want to look at, and you can see that it's selected when it gets an orange border. Then go into the top left to View, then down to Frame Selected. That'll perfectly focus you in on the thing you selected, although you'll probably want to zoom out. This works for literally anything you can select, and I use it a ton. But if you go back to the option, you can see its shortcut key right next to it, which is numpad period. I feel like it would be easier to just press that button to do that, but you don't need to press it that often, so just pick whatever feels right. And if you don't have a numpad, but you still want to use that shortcut, don't forget you can reassign that key by going to Edit, Preferences, Key Map, and then searching for Frame Selected. Anyway, that's literally all the ways you could ever need to look around. But even if that all went in one ear and out the other, don't worry, the kind of modeling we're doing doesn't really require you to look around that much. But considering it would be a million times easier if you could, I would highly recommend getting used to one or more of those methods. I have a link in the description to a doc where I laid out all the major functions I'm talking about and their shortcuts. Now let's actually start the modeling. Step 1 of any model is just knowing where to start, and one thing that I can tell you is that we don't need a cube. It isn't the worst starting point, but there is something better, so let's delete it. Click it, and then you can right-click, and down at the bottom, click Delete. And as you can see, the shortcut is the X key. You can also just hit the actual delete key on your keyboard to delete it. All of this does the same stuff. Now to add in a better object. To see what we have, at the top, go to Add, then Mesh. All the other non-mesh options are special and weird, so all the plain objects you'll use to model are in the mesh category. We're making a simple vase, so imagine what simple 3D shape is the best to start with. I don't want to door you too much, so I'll just tell you that we want a cylinder. Now in some ways, you could basically use this as a vase, but that's boring. What I want is the classic cartoony vase shape, where it kind of puffs out at the bottom and shrinks in at the top. If you need a clear image in front of you to reference, you can always just Google vase, and you can use any of these images as a reference. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but you can literally drag an image straight from Google Images into your viewport window, and it'll appear in your scene as a reference image. I'll just ad-lib mine though. So how the heck do we actually warp this object to make it look how we want? Super simple, we just need to change modes. In the top left, you can see we're in object mode, which is just where we can look at and move objects around without changing their shape. To change their shape, click on the dropdown and go to Edit mode. But you will only see this option if you have a mesh selected. If you select this light or the camera, you won't see it. Lots of things in all these menus change depending on what you have selected, so make sure you have our cylinder selected to see the option. Now we can see all the points that make up the shape of the cylinder. Just to give you the exact terms, these points are called vertices, the lines that connect vertices are called edges, and the flat planes in between all of those are called faces. Now if we click one of the vertices, we select it only. And on the left, you can see all the different tools that we can use to edit stuff. They're just symbols right now, so you can grab the edge of the buttons and pull them out, and then they will show their names. There are a lot of them, but for now, just pay attention to the first three: move, rotate, and scale. For move, you can grab these arrows and pull out what you've selected in that direction. You can also grab the white circle in the middle to just grab it freely and move it around as if it's attached to your cursor. For rotate, you'll only see an effect if you grab another vertex, so shift-click another vertex to select it too. Shift-clicking always adds to your selection. Now you can grab one of these circles here to rotate it on that axis. The scale tool works like the other tools, but let's shift-click 2 more vertices so we select the whole face. It'll turn orange if we successfully selected the full face. Just like before, grabbing these little gizmos scales your selection out in the direction they're pointing, and with the white circle scaling the whole thing out in all directions. Personally, since it's so much easier than grabbing that white circle, since you might accidentally grab one of the other bits, I'll say that the shortcut to scale everything you've selected is S. Once you hit S, you move your mouse farther away from the object to make it bigger, or closer to make it smaller. Then click to solidify the change, or right-click to erase the change. You'll probably want to make pretty gentle mouse movements, or else you could scale it into itself, which always screws things up. The biggest benefit of using shortcuts is that you can have another tool selected, then use the shortcut to do the action anyway, so I can easily scale and move things without having to switch tools that much. With just these tools, you can do a lot of things, so if you screwed up your cylinder by messing with everything, just Ctrl Z to undo until you're back to normal. If you made too many changes and the undo isn't letting you go back that far, just go back into object mode and then delete the cylinder and add a whole new one back in. Now we can actually start thinking about how we turn this cylinder into a vase. Your first thought should hopefully be, I can edit the top and bottom, but how am I supposed to edit the center of the cylinder if there aren't any vertices there? The answer is, we need to cut another loop of vertices into the sides that go around the cylinder. That introduces us to another tool, the Loop Cut tool. Once you select it on the left and hover over the cylinder, you'll see it showing you where it's going to add a new edge. Click, and now you can see that it's added a bunch of vertices all the way around the whole cylinder. Now you can scale that new loop in with S, or the scale tool. The tool adds a cut perpendicular to the edge you're hovering over, so make sure you're hovering over the longer vertical edges instead of the shorter horizontal ones. You don't need more vertical edges. But we want the top and bottom to be different sizes too. The most recent cut you made is still selected, but now you're going to have to shift select every single other vertex in each loop to scale it out, right? Obviously not, that's annoying. There's a shortcut for that, and it's a good one to learn. It's a super simple one, just alt-click on an edge. To get it right, you need to click on the edge that is a part of the loop that you want to select. That'll select every vertex in that loop. There is a button for this function in the menus, but it's honestly just too annoying to find and use. I can guarantee that alt-click is easier, even if you hate shortcut keys. Also, if you're on a Mac, then it's Option and click for you. Now just scale the whole loop you've selected with S, and you don't even need to reselect the scale tool. But we need more loops to get the shape we want, so use the Loop Cut tool on the top and bottom half sections to add more loops that we can edit. To get the shape I'm aiming for, we can make the bottom middle loop the thickest point in the vase, and the 3 loops above it just slope down into it. But of course, the process can be different if you want a different vase shape. Just add more loops if these loops aren't good enough to achieve that shape, although I'll show you some tools in a bit that'll probably make some things easier. I'll add a couple more on mine just to make the shape more appealing. We can make it fully smooth later, so don't add too many. Don't forget that you can also move each loop up and down and even rotate them. Don't be afraid to go nuts with it if you feel like you can. Tutorials are much more fun if you can make the vase all your own. Just remember that undo is your friend. Use it a ton. Moving things back into place is hard, but undoing is perfect and quick. Also, to delete a loop, obviously you need to select it with Alt-click and hit X or delete, but there's another menu that pops up. The right-click menu doesn't have this. Deleting stuff in edit mode isn't as straightforward as deleting stuff in object mode, so you need to tell it exactly what you want to delete and how you want to delete it. In this case, if you want to remove the loop without cutting a hole in your model, you need to click Dissolve Edges. This removes the edge, but in a way that's more like you never added it in the first place. I use it a lot. The other main ones you'll use are deleting vertices, which deletes what you have selected and all the faces connected to them, and deleting faces, which deletes only the full faces you have selected. You'll know when you have a full face selected when it turns orange, otherwise it won't do anything. Let's make use of this by deleting the one big face at the top of the vase, since vases are obviously supposed to be open to have room for flowers. Alt-click the top loop, and as you can see the top face turns orange, so we can hit X and delete faces. Now it's open. If you want, you could even select individual faces around the vase to delete them too, adding holes to your vase. It's not the most practical thing to have in a vase, but that is a thing you can do if you want. Now I can hear your next thought. How do we make it smooth? You could just add a ton of loops to every single part of the model and then move them out just a tiny bit just to make each part a little bit more curved, but that's obviously ludicrous. There's a different method that's infinitely easier, and it's used in pretty much every model under the sun. Go back into object mode. Now we have to drag back out the two panels we shrunk to our right, so grab the edge and pull them out. The top panel is called the outliner, and it just shows you a list of every object or other thing in your file. It's not important, but you can double click on the cylinder object and rename it to vase, just to keep things nice and tidy. But what we need is in the bottom panel, called the Properties panel, which has a bunch of different tabs. We don't really need the outliner, so if you want, you could just grab the middle part between both of them and drag it up to make the Properties panel much bigger. It would take way too long to explain all of these tabs in order, and it would also be kind of pointless since you don't really use most of them. Just go to the blue wrench tab. This is called the Modifiers tab, where we can add modifiers, which, as you can probably guess, can change the object they're applied to in a bunch of different ways. Just to let you know, the Properties panel is another place that changes a lot depending on what you have selected, so make sure your vase is selected. Objects like the light or camera don't have this tab, so you won't see it if you have them selected. Now if you press Add Modifier, you're given this giant list of drop-downs and stuff that you're probably never going to use. Ignore all that and just go to the search bar, not the search bar that is above the Add Modifiers button. You need to click Add Modifiers first, and then go to that search bar. Here you can search the whole list of modifiers if you know the name of the one you want. I don't think I've actually gone into the other menus and submenus to add modifiers in ages, although it might be fun for a beginner to explore. If you're in an older version, you might not have a search button to press, so just start typing when the modifier list comes up. Anyway, the one that you want is called the Subdivision Surface Modifier. This is easily one of the most used modifiers in the whole program. Once you select it, you can instantly see what happens. It basically added a loop cut between every single edge, but it also mapped out where to place that loop to make the whole thing smoother. If you turn this number up, you can see that it keeps adding more and more edges to make the thing even smoother. The number itself is just how many times you want it to add new loops in between each previous loop. But don't add too many levels of smoothness here, especially if you don't have a beefy computer. Every single vertex that exists in this space is one more bunch of calculations that Blender has to do. So if you add hundreds of thousands of vertices because of the subdivision modifier, that's hundreds of thousands of calculations that'll slow you down. And imagine how horrible it would be if you had multiple objects in the same scene, all with that insane definition. Not good. That's why we use modifiers. You can just turn them off. This little computer monitor button above the settings shows whether the modifier's effects are visible or not. If you perform the exact same action of manually adding loops and whatnot, that would be like 100 actions that would be so much harder to reverse, even with undo. And all the while, you're slowing your computer down. Here, you can just add it, mess around with the stats, and then turn it on and off as you need it. You could even use these two numbers separately, the viewport and render subdivision level. The viewport one is what you see here, of course, since this is the viewport. But the render one is what shows up later, when you actually tell Blender to make all the lighting and shadow calculations of the scene, and put out a pretty image of it all. You can use this to say that my computer is actually much faster when looking at only one level of subdivision while I'm working, but in the end, I actually want it to be smoother. This is just for an example, but as you can see, in the scene it's still blocky, but when I press the render button, the result it's showing me is smoothed out. This is an extremely useful thing, especially when it comes to character animation, since it's so much faster to pose a character with low subdivisions, but of course you don't really want them to look all blocky and weird when you render them out at the end. I mean, unless you do want that, I guess. Anyway, as for these two buttons up here, or any other settings, don't worry about it. Just keep it on the default setting. Okay, that's all of that, but as you can see, when we have a workable number of subdivisions in the modifier, the model isn't actually smooth. Even if there are more squares everywhere, it takes a bunch of subdivisions to actually make it look smooth. Warning, don't add too many subdivisions. That's what lags your computer. We need to do some digital trickery to make it look truly objectively smooth. It's simple though. With your vase selected, just right-click and click Shade Smooth. Boom, it's smooth now. This is basically a fake kind of smoothness. As you can see, if I turn down the subdivisions, on the silhouette of the model, it's still technically made of a bunch of flat shapes. But selecting Shade Smooth is you telling Blender to just think of it as if it was smooth. Now you only need to keep your subdivision modifier at a maximum of like 2. because adding anything more than that doesn't really appear to do anything, especially if you're looking at it from a distance. Personally, I never go above 2 or 3, just so you know. We have more to add, but you need to stop right now and save your model. There are so many crazy things you can do in Blender, so it sucks even more if you lose all that progress. You could save under File in the top left of the window, or press Ctrl S to save, like all programs. Personally, I'd make it a habit to just press Ctrl S every once in a while, since even I've forgotten to press it sometimes, only to have some progress taken away from me. I also have a whole separate folder for all of my models, but obviously you can deal with that once you make more of them. Anyway, there's a second modifier we need here. I'm not sure if you noticed, but nothing in real life is a completely flat tube like this. Even paper has the tiniest bit of thickness. This isn't even an atom thick, it's impossibly digitally thin. So we just need to find a modifier to add in some thickness to the whole thing. First of all, when you go back into the search bar, you can see that the subdivision modifier is now right under it. It saves the most recent modifiers you've used, so you don't always have to go searching for them. What we need now is called the solidify modifier. You just add it in, it's now a vase that could feasibly exist in real life. Well, sort of. The shade smooth setting is now making it look a bit weird, but we'll fix that in a bit. In the modifier settings, you can see the thickness value here, and as is the case with all setting numbers like this in Blender, you can click on it and drag left and right to change the number, so you don't have to worry about typing out what you want. Since we don't actually want a crazy amount of thickness, you can also hold Shift while doing this to make it change a lot slower. That's the main setting you need to care about, but the offset determines whether the thickness is going to be added to the inside or outside of the model, with the inside being -1 and the outside being +1, and with the middle ground being possible as well. All of that's up to you though. But here's another important lesson about modifiers. Order matters. If you grab these dots at the top right corner of the modifier and drag it above the subdivision modifier, you can see it changes the model. Modifiers work in order from top to bottom, so here it's saying add thickness first and then smooth it out. It's easier to see if you turn the model back to shade flat. The solidify modifier just adds another layer of faces on the inside, so if you smooth it after, it'll smooth out the sharp loop of faces at the top. While if you smooth it before, it'll keep the sharp edge. There are other better ways of creating sharp edges than solidifying after smoothing though, so just keep the solidify modifier first. Back in edit mode, we can create a much better sharp edge, but as you can see, there's something weird going on here. The smoothed out model is actually covering the vertices we need to select in some places. By default in edit mode, you have to edit the unmodified model while looking at the modified model, which obviously can mess up a lot of stuff. There's a button to fix it though. In the modifiers panel, you can click this little triangle button on the modifier to tell it to stick all the vertices on the modified object, instead of being the ghost of the original blocky object. I use this option a lot. It also automatically works for all the modifiers above it, so we can also see the vertices on the inside, since that part was created by the solidify modifier. Now for the sharp edge. If we add another loop cut at the very top here, you can see that it gets a tiny bit sharper. One of the best ways of creating a sharp edge on a model with a subdivision modifier is to have two edges super close to each other. So we could add even more loops, or just move up this one to make it closer. But there's actually another really useful tool just for this situation, the Edge Slide tool. If you select it, it puts this little pin on top of your selection, and if you grab the circle at the top and pull it up or down, it slides the loop along the edges they're attached to. This is a lot more exact than just using the move tool to move it up. Although if you push this loop too close to the opening loop, it'll like snap into place and look weird. This is because these two loops are exactly on top of each other, and lots of stuff starts to break when the vertices and edges are in the exact same location. But just make sure it's a tiny bit away from the opening loop. Now it's flat, but it isn't being messed up by the shade smooth effect. There's one more little thing I think you should use the Edge Slide tool for, just to make it feel more like a real vase. As you probably know, the bottom of a vase is always flat, so it can sit still on a table. But the subdivision modifier made it round, with this weird kind of jagged fan look to it too. But if we add a loop and slide it down, we can make it flatter. It's a lot harder to just move it or scale the loop down to the bottom of the vase. So here's where the Edge Slide tool is extra handy. So we can slide this loop all the way down and, oh god, what happened? Don't worry, that's just a weird little quirk of the solidify modifier and the loops being on top of each other. As I mentioned, things start to break when vertices and edges are exactly on top of each other. Just slide it back up a tiny bit or scale it out a tiny bit and it'll fix itself. Now as you can see, it's flat. That weird jagged look is still a bit there though, so if you really want to fix it, just add another loop and slide it down. Now it's perfect. Normally, you don't want to have giant faces like this in your model, but we can get around it. You can also use the edge slide tool for sharpening this tip in the middle here. Just slide a loop down towards it, and it's sharper. Things will get even more sharp if you also bring a loop up from the other side too. Just to show off another good use, it's also nice for creating this sharper point in this kind of bulbous design too. Slide them in, and you can even move them up or down to tweak the rounded bit here. Knowing how to sharpen certain points of a smooth model is easily one of the most useful pieces of knowledge to have when making models that truly feel good in the end. And that's the vase completely done. Or at least, if you just want to make an easy little vase. I gave you all the tools you need to make any number of crazy vases, so you can really just go off and mess with it as you please. You can even make like a top hat if you felt like it. I mean, at this point, there's also nothing stopping you from using all these same tools to make something crazy out of the other primitive models you see in the add menu, or messing with all the other edit mode tools I didn't mention. The vase is really only a means to an end for teaching you all these tools. Now that that's done, you can go wild. But there's still some stuff to learn. It's time to add some color to the vase. To mess with colors, in the Properties panel, go to the tab marked with this red checkered sphere. This is the Material tab. If it's not there, you need to select a mesh object first for it to show up. This box up here shows a list of every material that the object has, but of course it doesn't have a material, so let's add a new one. There are some really crazy ways of making complex materials, but we don't need to deal with those yet. Each starting material is made to have a ton of easy settings just to get the thing going. Obviously, the color is here. Just click on the color itself, select the color in the wheel that pops up, but wait, we can't actually see it changing the color. Why not? That's because this is a super simplified view of what's actually going on in the world, which is made to be super lag-free so we can work more quickly. And what we just changed was the object's real color. To deal with what's actually real in the scene, you need to go up here to where these spheres are. These are the different levels of rendering you can see in the viewport. Rendering is the term for when the computer goes through the whole process of calculating all the lights, shadows, textures, etc. in the scene. And the ball on the far right is the one which will show us what the scene really looks like when it's fully rendered. As you might expect, this is the view that has the highest chance of slowing your computer down. But the default rendering engine should be pretty efficient about it, so hopefully it won't be much of an issue. Now you can see its real color, and you can see it update as you pick a new one. I'm obviously going to go with purple. Below the color, it also has metallic and roughness sliders. Metallic is obvious, although it takes a lot more than this to make something look like realistic metal. Roughness, though, is basically the shininess of the object. 0 roughness is perfectly shiny, and 1 roughness is perfectly flat. This is great for getting a sort of plastic look. For me, 0 metallic and 0.1 roughness is what I'm aiming for. There are also tons of other junk below this bit here, but you can learn about all of them later. You can also turn on the alpha, which is basically the opacity, but if you wanted something like a vase made of glass, you'd have to get into the weeds of the materials a bit. Save that for a later tutorial. There are plenty about making glass, but it's more of an intermediate thing to deal with. Really quick, just because I wanted to know where it was for ages when I was first learning Blender, you can actually change the color in the simplified view too. At the very bottom of all these dropdowns in the material settings, you can see the viewport display dropdown. Here's the color that this material will have when in this view. I always like having this color set up too. Since rendering takes lights into account, you can see the light in our scene at work. You can move it in object mode since we have the exact same move tool here. But to change its brightness and color, you need to go down to the green light bulb tab that only shows up in the Properties panel when you select a light. This has all the special settings that only lights would need. You can change its color, and its strength is its brightness. I'll keep mine white though, just to keep things simple. Now let's set up a bit of a scene, which we can render out in a second. It won't be much, I just want a table for the vase to sit on. You have all the tools you'll need to add that yourself, so feel free to pause the video and give it a shot. But of course I'm going to go through it on my side anyway. Since I want a square table, the best primitive object is just a plane, which is literally just a flat square. Still in object mode, scale it out however much you want. You can scale it out in edit mode too, but in this case you don't need to. Then select your vase object, and move it up so it looks like it's sitting on top of the table. You could even add a solidify modifier to the platform to make it look more like a real table. And give it a material so it'll look more interesting. I'll make it a flat dark brown. That's all you really need for the table, but most scenes tend to look better when there are multiple lights in different positions. So if you want, you can select your light, right-click, and then duplicate objects, which does, that. It'll stick to your cursor, so click to place it down, so you can use the move tool to move it. You can add a new light from the add menu too, and there are even different types of lights you can mess with. But for simplicity's sake, I'll just have a second point light, which is just a simple ball of light pretty much. I'm going to move the second light behind the vase, so at this angle, it'll create a nice rim light effect. I love rim lights. And you're basically done with the vase. For fun, I drew these flower PNGs that you can import into your scene and add to your vase if you want. Just download the file in the Google Drive link in the description, and take the PNGs out. Then in your scene, go to Add, Image, Mesh Plane, and then just select whatever PNG you want. The one weird setting to mess with is right here. Just switch it from Principled to Emission. Emission means it'll glow a bit, so you'll be able to see the colors better. Press Import, and now it's a fully functional object in your scene, which you can move, rotate, and scale like anything else. Do whatever you feel like with them. Or you could even just draw your own, and do the same process with that. I guess you can always try to model a flower, if you want a decent challenge. And since you actually have a floor now, you can also use Shift-tilde to go into walk navigation like I mentioned earlier, hover over your table, and then hit Tab to activate gravity and land on your table to walk around and look at your vase. Moving in a rendered view may be taxing on some computers though, so just be wary. Blender is only so efficient. It does matter how strong your computer is. You can always turn it back to that simplified view we had before, which should definitely be fast enough. Okay, let's say this is exactly how we want it, and now we want to render it. You can't render anything without a camera, and there's already one in the scene, but like anything else, you can add one from the add menu. Also, like everything, you can move it around and rotate it, so you can use these tools to put it in a good place if you want to, but it's really hard to tell what the camera is actually seeing in that case, so you don't know for sure what's going to be rendered, but we can look through it ourselves. In the top right buttons in the viewport, click the camera button. This puts you into the eyes of the camera. Everything in this boundary is what will be rendered. But this brings up a different problem. How do we move it now? The answer is that this is actually the best way to use the walk navigation function. Still in camera view, Shift-tilde like usual, move your view to the spot you want, and then click. Now if we orbit out of camera view, we can see that the camera is actually moved to that spot. Now we're able to render. In the top left of the Blender window, just go under the Render tab and click Render Image. It'll pop out a new window that'll eventually show you the image that was seen in the camera view. Then you can go to Image, Save As, and then save it like any normal image. But since we don't really need the image to be this wide, here's how to change the dimensions of the rendered image. In the Properties panel, you can always see a gray printer tab called the Output tab, which shows a lot of different settings about what's being put out when you render something. And there you can see the resolution X and Y, which are the length and width of the rendered image. For the camera though, it only cares about the proportions of the image, not the actual size. So as you can see, you can turn down the length of the image and it just grows taller instead. You'll probably have to reposition the camera to fit the new proportions. Then just render again, and the new image will have the new proportions. Also don't forget, you can increase the number overall to get a higher resolution image, but it does take more render time the higher the resolution you put, so don't go insanely high. And that's it. For this tutorial at least, since I'm sure whatever you actually want to make is way cooler than this. Now that you know the super basics, you can mess with more tools and meshes and junk, or look at more tutorials on the next level of what you may want to make. Don't shy away from tutorials. The people making them want to help you. And not to mention, I still like a ton of tutorials, and ask for help in a lot of different places when I'm out of my depth. There's so much in Blender that no single human being could possibly know it all. Even the masters you see on social media probably aren't capable of doing something somewhere in the program. You just don't see that part of them as much as they see it themselves. Anyway, what tutorial specifically do I recommend? Well, Blender Guru's Beginner Donut tutorial. He's usually the guy that people point to for beginners to look to. And he's super famous in the Blender world for that. That tutorial was the one that made me realize that Blender was actually approachable and understandable. But it seems like some others are overwhelmed by the amount of detail he gives. But if you got through this video, you already have a head start on getting it, so I would highly recommend it. By the end of his video series, you'll have a truly comprehensive basis in lots of different parts of Blender. He even makes a new one for each major update to Blender, and version 5.0 just came out, so he'll be posting a new one. But if you do get overwhelmed, don't forget that you can just skip parts of the tutorial. You don't need to be a jack of all trades right away, if at all. Back when I first watched it, I didn't even follow the tutorial. I just watched through it, understood what was going on, and then looked into character modeling tutorials, since that was what I was actually interested in. No matter what, it's always more fun to make something that you actually want to make. That's what gets you to constantly come back to Blender and keep practicing, not just copying tutorials one-to-one and making tons of vases and donuts. Think about why you're even getting into 3D art in the first place, and find tutorials about that. There's a whole treasure trove of free content on YouTube, so just search up something like Blender character modeling for beginners, and something's bound to come up. There are some paid tutorials elsewhere on the internet, but I will definitely say that you don't have to pay for anything. I got to where I am just based on free tutorials and practice, and if you're bothering to listen to what I have to say, then surely something went right. That being said, I am planning on making a character modeling for beginners tutorial of my own, since that's most of what I care about, and I have a hunch that most other people care about that too. It'll definitely be even longer, since character modeling is inherently much more complicated, and I want it to be comprehensive, so it'll take a bit longer to make, so keep an eye out for it. It'll be free and posted on YouTube. But there's also tons of other character modeling tutorials too. One I can recommend is Lacruzo's low poly character tutorial. Even if you don't want to make low poly models, it's a nice place to start to learn what goes into making a character. There are tons of tutorials that you'll see if you just search for them, so feel free to go searching. But again, character modeling as a whole can be pretty complicated, so just be warned. Anyway, if you have questions, comment them below or go to my Linktree for a link to my Discord server, where I have a help channel you can ask questions in. I'll try to answer as many of them for as long as I can. I like keeping that sort of thing public, so people who are less willing to ask directly might find their solution in someone else's question. Or if you have no questions at all and you think you made the best vase out of all of them, you can drop it in the art channel and show it off. Although if too many people are flooding that section with vases, I'll make a separate channel for it. I do want to see them. But yeah, that's it. Also in my Linktree are all the accounts where I post art, so go look at those too. If you want to support me, you can buy one of my models on Gumroad. Thanks for watching and good luck with Blender.